Between 1936 and 1945, the Third Reich promoted an unprecedented system of underground fortifications. From the Atlantic coasts to the mountains of Silesia, Germany excavated bunkers capable of resisting air attacks, protecting command centers and housing complete industries underground. This strategy transformed the European subsoil into a parallel front, invisible but decisive. When the war ended, part of that infrastructure was destroyed or dismantled. Another part remained outside official records. For decades, no one entered again. It was only at the beginning of the 21st century when remains of that hidden world began to reappear, preserved underground with a precision that surprised even the researchers. What role was this system going to fulfill if the Reich survived? Why were many of its structures never completely documented? And what do the places that have come to light again today reveal? The underground empire of the Reich. Why did Hitler build hidden bunkers? Under 3 meters of Danish sand, time had stopped since 1945. When the storms of winter 2008 struck the coast of Huvig, the waves dragged centuries of accumulated sediment, revealing what nature had hidden for more than 6 decades. Tommy Casso, an electrician-turned-history enthusiast, was one of the first to descend the concrete stairs toward what he described as the heart of a pyramid with mummies around. What emerged from those eroded dunes was not an isolated finding, but a window into the most ambitious underground engineering project in modern history. Between 1936 and 1945, the Third Reich developed a network of underground bunkers whose scale and technical sophistication had no precedent in Europe. These structures, far from being simple shelters, represented a complete system of command, defense, production, and resistance against the Allied offensive. The Nazi obsession with underground infrastructure began with the rearmament policy initiated in 1935. Under the supervision of Fritz Todt and the organization Todt, the first permanent military defensive structures were planned. The Siegfried Line in the west and the defenses on the eastern border marked just the beginning of a radical transformation in German defensive strategy. The turning point came after the invasion of France in 1940. Hitler no longer wanted to simply defend territories. He sought to create a bunker system that would guarantee the survival of the German military apparatus in case of total war. In 1942, after Todt's death in an air accident, Albert Speer assumed the direction of the Ministry of Armament and Munitions. With the exponential increase of Allied bombings over German industrial cities, Speer ordered the radical decentralization of armament production. The solution was revolutionary, moving complete factories underground. Thus was born the concept of underground factories, gigantic camouflaged structures, waterproof, buried in mountains, tunnels or hills, capable of resisting even direct impacts from high-tonnage bombs. The Reich had decided to bet on an underground war that would forever change the concept of military fortification. The technical leadership of the Nazi underground program fell on a clearly defined hierarchy. Adolf Hitler acted as the ultimate promoter of every architectural and military program of the Reich. His strategic vision was obsessive with the idea of a millennial Reich capable of resisting any offensive. In his personal directives, he demanded that the bunkers could operate isolated, without contact with the outside world, for entire weeks or months. Fritz Todt, as chief engineer of the regime, designed the centralized structure of the organization Todt, the most powerful construction entity of the Reich. Under his direction, the plans of the first bunkers of the West were standardized and technical protocols for construction in difficult terrain were defined. His technical manuals established rigorous specifications according to the threat level of the area and the strategic function of each installation. Albert Speer inherited and expanded this vision with industrial pragmatism. His most significant contribution was the massive transfer of critical industries underground. His technical instructions indicated that each underground factory should be autonomous, electrified, protected from air attacks, and connected by railroad with the rest of the Reich. The technical orders were codified in written directives sent from the Ministry of Armament to the field engineers of the organization Todt. The selection of locations for these underground bunkers followed rigorous technical criteria developed by multidisciplinary teams. Specialized geologists, military engineers, and OT officers analyzed 3 critical factors that would determine the success or failure of each installation. Geological stability constituted the essential technical foundation. Regions with calcareous or compact granite subsoils were the most coveted for their natural resistance to excavation and their structural support capacity. The Harz Massif was selected for the Mittelbau-Dora complex for its natural solidity, ideal for excavating high-resistance galleries without risk of collapse. In Austria, the Bergkristall tunnel was excavated in hard rock to avoid leaks and guarantee structural stability for decades. Natural camouflage constituted the second strategic pillar. Wooded, mountainous areas or those with abundant vegetation offered immediate advantages against Allied aerial detection. In Poland, the location of Hitler's headquarters, the Wolfschanze, was chosen precisely for its geographical isolation and natural forest cover. These areas significantly reduced visibility from the air and complicated precision bombing operations. Railway accessibility represented the third fundamental logistical pillar. Every underground complex had to be connected directly to an existing or planned railway network. The entrances were designed to allow direct access of supply trains, as in La Coupole or in the Epelec complex. This guaranteed the efficient transport of construction materials, heavy machinery, and subsequently armament and specialized technical personnel. The typology of Third Reich bunkers was developed in 4 main categories, each with a specifically defined military or industrial function. Command bunkers served as neuralgic centers of the Nazi high leadership. The most emblematic was the Berlin Führerbunker, built in phases between 1936 and 1944. Composed of 2 differentiated levels and protected by walls 4 meters thick. It included executive offices, strategic meeting rooms, armored bedrooms, autonomous water and electricity system. Armament bunkers specialized in the assembly, storage and launch of strategic weapons. The Blockhaus d'Epernay in France was designed specifically to launch V-2 rockets toward London. Its 5-meter armored concrete cover and complete integration with railway lines made it a practically impenetrable missile silo. La Coupole and the Siracourt 5-1 bunker represented technical variations of the same operational concept. Coastal defense bunkers formed an integral part of the Atlantic Wall fortification system. Battery Tot, near Calais, was armed with 380mm Krupp naval cannons in reinforced casemates capable of firing up to 56 kilometers, effectively covering the English Channel. Each defense bunker included specialized ammunition depots, integrated anti-aircraft systems, detection radars, and armed observatories. From 1943, strategic priority focused on underground factories. The transfer of key industries to underground environments became an existential necessity for the Reich. The B8 Bergkristall in Austria and Weingut 1 in Bavaria are paradigmatic examples. These factories occupied up to 50,000 square meters, built in galleries with reinforced concrete arches, capable of housing complete aircraft or rocket production lines. Nazi underground architecture reached exceptional levels of technical sophistication for the era. The structures were built following standardized technical manuals and specific directives according to the threat level of the area and the assigned operational function. The walls varied in thickness from 0.5 to 5 meters, depending on the type of expected threat and the criticality of the installation. In the most important factories and command bunkers, concrete was reinforced with structural steel, superimposed anchoring meshes, and multiple layers of protection. In the Berlin Führerbunker, the cover reached 3 meters thick, protected by an additional layer of gravel and earth to cushion large magnitude explosions. Ventilation systems represented a critical technical innovation. They included external air intakes protected with specialized filters, high-capacity electric extractors, manual emergency fans, and vertical circulation ducts strategically distributed. Some bunkers had internal overpressure systems to prevent the entry of toxic gases or contaminants in case of chemical attacks. The internal design varied according to its specific operational function. Map rooms with updating systems, ammunition depots with temperature controls, electrical stations with redundant generators, high-capacity diesel generators, communication rooms with encrypted equipment, command posts with coordination systems, collective bedrooms, industrial kitchens, sanitary facilities with treatment systems, and even fully equipped medical clinics. To avoid their detection from the air, many bunkers were covered with cultivated vegetation, compacted earth, and false structures. Specialized mimetic canvases, anti-reflection paint, vegetable roofs that imitated natural cover, and false access routes that confused aerial observation were used. Some, like those of the Wolfschanze, were designed to look like simple rural constructions or agricultural warehouses. This underground system constituted a military strategic network built with the technical precision of the most advanced Nazi logistical apparatus, designed to guarantee the survival of the Third Reich under enemy fire, disguised in plain sight and deeply buried in the European landscape. Buried alive, the forced labor behind the concrete. Behind each gigantic structure that emerged from the European subsoil, a human machinery of devastating proportions was hidden. Between 1943 and 1945, the underground construction of the Third Reich was sustained on the shoulders of hundreds of thousands of enslaved workers, organized in an implacable administrative system that converted human survival into a measurable economic variable. The Nazi apparatus had developed a human supply network controlled by the SS, the organization TODT, and the Ministry of Armament directed by Albert Speer. Workers were categorized according to ethnic origin, legal status, or racial classification. Each group had specific assignments within the underground projects, from manual excavation to installation of specialized electrical systems. Soviet prisoners of war constituted the most numerous segment of this workforce. After Operation Barbarossa, tens of thousands of captured Soviet soldiers were transferred from camps like Stalag 3C directly to underground work. Wehrmacht records document that more than 3 million Soviet prisoners passed through Nazi camps. At least a third perished in the first year of capture, and tens of thousands worked in underground works until total physical collapse. Political deportees and resistors formed another significant segment of specialized workers. French, Belgian, Czech and Polish citizens arrested for anti-government activities were classified as security prisoners and sent to camps like Natzweiler Struthof, Flossenburg or Mauthausen. Many were transferred from camps to underground factories in sealed cargo wagons, without ventilation or food during trips that could last 48 to 72 continuous hours. Deported Jews represented the most vulnerable category of the system. After the intensification of the final solution, thousands were selected in camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau to be sent to forced labor in underground installations. They were considered useful until collapse, and their working conditions were systematically worse than those of the rest of the workers, with reduced food rations and more severe punishments. Eastern workers, officially known as Ostarbeiter, included Ukrainian, Belarusian, Polish and Baltic civilians massively deported from their villages to work in industrial zones. Although initially classified as civilian workers, often their conditions resembled those of concentration camps, especially when they were assigned to underground projects of maximum strategic priority. Concentration camp prisoners constituted the operational core of slave labor in complexes like Mittelbau-Dora, Gusen and Weingut-Oise. They were managed directly by the SS, and their life expectancy as labor rarely exceeded 3 months in the most extreme underground working conditions. Labor organization followed a strict hierarchy designed to maximize productive efficiency. Nazi supervisors were assisted by kapos, prisoners with delegated authority who organized groups of 20 to 100 men called commandos. These groups worked by specific objectives: manual excavation, transport of heavy materials, concrete foundation, specialized electrical installation, industrial machinery assembly. The capo system created an internal control structure that maximized efficiency while minimizing direct German supervision. Mittelbau-Dora, inaugurated in 1943, became the most representative forced labor center of the Nazi underground system. Built inside Mount Kohnstein in northern Thuringia, its objective was to produce V-2 rockets in a secret plant called Mittelwerk. At its operational peak, more than 60,000 prisoners passed through the camp. The initial conditions were so brutal that during the first 6 months there were no barracks. Prisoners slept directly in the tunnels, exposed to rock dust, excavation gases, and extreme temperatures that fluctuated according to the season. SS and camp inspection documents reveal a mortality of between 200 and 300 inmates daily during the first months of operation. Deaths were officially attributed to physical collapses, accidental cave-ins, explosives accidents and gas asphyxiation, although internal medical records show that malnutrition and extreme exhaustion were the predominant causes of death. Gusenprobuster II and the Third, administrative subcamps of Mauthausen, were directly linked to the construction of the Bergkristall complex in St. Georgen an der Gusen. This underground complex was destined for the production of the Messerschmitt Me 262 jet aircraft. Bergkristall was excavated under a rocky hill and was one of the largest underground works of the Reich, more than 50,000 square meters distributed on several levels, accessible by railway tunnels that allowed direct transport of components. Internal records show that approximately 8,500 forced workers were used in its construction. Deaths occurred due to physical collapse due to extreme effort, work without adequate ventilation, tunnel cave-ins, and lung diseases caused by inhalation of rock dust. Limestone dust and the total absence of respiratory protection caused pneumonia and progressive asphyxiation. Specialized workers such as physicists, chemists, and engineers were selected specifically for their technical knowledge but faced the same lethal conditions as the rest. Weingut 1, the project for a gigantic aircraft engine factory under concrete arch structures 32 meters high, exemplifies the systematic brutality of the system. Forced workers had to excavate tunnels, pour concrete, transport structural iron, and assemble structures without modern electrical tools or safety equipment. The Dachau War Tribunal documented in 1947 the death of more than 3,000 prisoners from exhaustion and mistreatment only in the initial construction phase. Workdays extended between 12 and 14 continuous hours, frequently without breaks for rest or food. In Dora, the system operated in double shifts. While one group slept 4 hours, the other worked, and then they exchanged positions without transition. Conversation during work was not allowed. Orders were transmitted by the kapos through shouting, and interruption of the work rhythm could mean a beating or isolation in underground cells without ventilation. Daily rations were calculatedly insufficient to sustain the required physical effort. In Bergkristall, it is documented that prisoners received watery soup and 300 to 400 grams of bread per day. Weight loss was dramatic. In 1 month, a healthy adult could lose up to 15 kilograms. Advanced malnutrition converted workers into Muslims, the term that prisoners used to describe those who had lost all hope and physical resistance capacity. The most common punishment was the post, tying the prisoner by the wrists with hands behind, suspended for hours until shoulder dislocation. Measured lashings, reduction of food rations, and summary executions in front of the rest of the group as a deterrent measure were also applied. The SS documented these punishments as necessary disciplinary measures to maintain required labor productivity. Rock dust and constant humidity generated chronic respiratory diseases. In Dora, dozens of cases of advanced silicosis were detected among workers who survived more than 6 months. Typhus and dysentery epidemics were frequent and deliberately ignored by the camp's medical administration. 30% of deaths in Mauthausen between 1943 and 1944 are officially attributed to gastrointestinal diseases caused by contaminated water and decomposing food. The SS kept a meticulous record of each worker: personal identification number, nationality, labor productivity, applied punishments, and date of death. The WVHA classified prisoners according to their capacity for hard work and assigned them to specific projects according to immediate production needs. There are orders signed by Oswald Pohl establishing production quotas, daily objectives, and penalties for delays, directly implicating private companies that contracted the services of the organization TOT. The transport of labor between camps and works was carried out in adapted cargo trains. Prisoners selected in Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Flossenbürg, or Sachsenhausen were transported in sealed wagons without ventilation or food. The trips could last up to 72 hours. Upon arrival, lifeless bodies were unloaded alongside the living. The human stock was constantly replenished through regular programmed transfers from various camps. In the final weeks of the Reich, many of these transfers ended in death marches, forced evacuations toward the west under freezing temperatures and without food. In April 1945, in Gusen II, more than 5,000 prisoners were forced to evacuate toward Mauthausen. Less than 20% arrived alive. The rest died on the way, shot for trying to escape, or abandoned due to total physical collapse. Chambers of punishment, the secret weapons of the Reich. While forced workers excavated tunnels in the depths of Europe, their efforts converged toward a terrifying objective: the construction of underground platforms for the revenge weapons of the Third Reich. As the war intensified and Hitler began to suffer decisive military reversals, he ordered the deployment of an armament program conceived to cause massive retaliation against Allied civilians. The Vergeltungswaffen were not simple offensive artifacts, but components of a complex industrial and logistical framework deeply linked to the underground engineering of the Nazi regime. Their development, storage, and possible deployment required the construction of colossal bunkers in France, Belgium, and Germany, whose technical characteristics reveal a monumental effort in terms of military design, structural protection, and operational capacity. The V-Weapons program was officially launched in 1942 when the German High Command authorized the development of 3 retaliation systems differentiated by their range and launch method. The V-1, technically known as Fiesler Fi-103, was a cruise missile powered by pulsojet with a maximum range of 250 kilometers. It carried an explosive charge of 850 kilograms and was launched from metal ramps mounted on reinforced concrete structures. The V-2, technically designated A-4, represented the world's first operational ballistic missile. It measured 14 meters in height, weighed 12.5 tons, and reached speeds exceeding 5,700 kilometers per hour. Its parabolic trajectory reached a maximum altitude of 80 to 90 kilometers before impacting its target with an explosive charge of 1 ton. The technical complexity of the V-2 required storage of cryogenic liquid oxygen and specialized vertical handling systems. The V-3, known as London Gun, constituted the most ambitious project, a long-distance cannon composed of multiple successive detonation chambers. Its objective was to fire projectiles from northern France to London with ballistic precision through the accumulation of secondary explosive impulses. The system required inclined tunnels of hundreds of meters excavated in calcareous hills. La Coupole, built in an old chalk quarry near Saint-Omer, was planned as the main V-2 launch base in the Pas-de-Calais region. Its most distinctive element is an armored concrete dome 5.5 meters thick and 71 meters in diameter, under which railway tunnels, specialized depots, and assembly workshops were arranged. The interior galleries had internal railway transfer systems, spaces for missile assembly and cryogenic fuel storage. The vertical assembly of rockets was planned in internal zones designated Gustav and Gretchen, designed to contain support rails and millimeter precision lifting systems. The structure included an armored railway station capable of receiving trains from Germany loaded with missile components. The design allowed continuous operations protected from intensive air bombings. The Siricourt bunker, also known as Site Number 157, was projected as a V-1 launch silo with capacity to prepare and launch up to 36 missiles per day. Its main cover was built using the advanced pouring system, where the roof was erected first and then construction proceeded below. This technique, known as Verbunkerung, allowed protecting the work from bombings during its execution. The design was completely symmetrical and housed fuel depots, assembly areas, and exit ramps oriented toward England. The installations included specialized maintenance workshops, spare parts warehouses, fuel systems, and final missile preparation areas. The structure was designed for industrial mass launch operations. The Blockhaus d'Eperlec, located near Saint-Omer, was the first large-scale installation for V-2 rockets. Planned as a production, storage, and launch plant, its walls reached thicknesses of up to 7 meters of reinforced concrete. The complex included an internal armored railway station, liquid oxygen production plant, vertical assembly rooms, transport ramps, armored chambers, and external structures designed to resist direct impacts from 5-ton bombs. The fortress of Mimoyek represented the materialization of the V-3 concept. Designed to house the most ambitious retaliation weapon, it consisted of a system of 500-600-meter-long tunnels drilled in a limestone hill with a precise inclination of 50 degrees. Each tunnel would serve as an underground cannon pointing directly toward London, 165 kilometers away. The design required reloading rooms, parallel technical tunnels, deep ventilation shafts, and railway lines for transport of specialized projectiles. The cover, reinforced with armored concrete, reached up to 5 meters thick. The original plan contemplated 25 cannons, capable of firing 600 projectiles per hour toward the British capital. The V installations were conceived as militarized factories integrated with advanced technical systems. In the case of the V2, the rocket had to be transported vertically from the assembly zone to the launch platform through precision hydraulic elevators. The interior structures had steel rail systems anchored to concrete, with support points designed to tolerate vibrations of up to 20 tons per impact. The production and storage of liquid oxygen was fundamental for the V2, as its engine used ethyl alcohol and LOX as propellants. The installations included buried cryogenic tanks with double-chamber thermal insulation, cooling chambers, and armored distribution stations. The storage temperature had to be maintained at -183 degrees Celsius through continuous refrigeration systems. Both La Coupole and Epelec had internal railway connections protected by walls of 3 to 4 meters, which allowed the entry of cargo trains directly inside the bunker without exposing the missiles to the open air. The wagons were adapted to support rockets in vertical position and specialized spare parts. Inside the bunkers, there were command rooms with telegraphic equipment, observation stations, electrical panels, and ballistic verification rooms. These dependencies were isolated from the rest of the complex through walls with double armor and solid steel doors. Communication systems allowed direct coordination with the High Command in Berlin. The development of these installations was directed by a scientific military elite. General Walter Dornberger, chief of the A4 program, was the main articulator of the use of underground structures for V2 launch. Under his command, the operational requirements of the bunkers were defined, such as the need for liquid oxygen storage, anti-bomb protection, and internal railway circulation. Werner von Braun, chief engineer of the Peenemünde base, actively collaborated in the technical design of the installations. His experience in ballistics and aerodynamics directly influenced the operation manuals, where the temperature, pressure, and structural stability conditions required for the missiles were detailed. The technical documents included precise specifications of structural load, ventilation diagrams, and logistical orders for LOX stations. Despite the colossal resources invested, none of these underground installations came to operate fully. La Coupole, the blockhouse, and Mimoyek were systematically bombed by the RAF and USAAF between 1943 and 1944 under the denomination Operation Crossbow. Allied intelligence services had identified the locations through aerial reconnaissance photography and reports from the French resistance. The blockhouse d'Epelec was severely damaged by a 5-ton tallboy bomb on August 27, 1943. The liquid oxygen plant was destroyed and the cover partially collapsed. The launch structures were rendered useless and the complex never came to launch operational missiles. Continuous bombings prevented necessary repairs. La Coupole was abandoned before its inauguration. The interior systems remained unfinished and the railway accesses were rendered useless by precise bombings. The tunnels remained flooded and the liquid oxygen installations were never activated. The dome structure survived, but the internal operational systems were destroyed. Mimoyek was partially flooded and collapsed after massive RAF attacks. The installation of the V3 firing system was prevented and the inclined tunnels were blocked by debris. The project was officially cancelled in July 1944 before completing the reloading installations. Faced with the impossibility of using these fixed structures, the Nazis opted to use mobile launch platforms for the V2 known as Meilerwagen, operated from forests, abandoned towns, or improvised fields. This alternative avoided dependence on static bunkers, but drastically reduced storage capacity and operational logistics. Between September 1944 and March 1945, more than 3,000 V2 rockets were launched from mobile platforms, causing more than 5,000 deaths in London, Antwerp, and other Allied cities. However, the missiles did not manage to reverse the Reich's military situation or stop the Allied offensive. The chambers of punishment became abandoned monuments of a failed strategy, testimony to Nazi technical ambition and the effectiveness of the coordinated Allied response. Forgotten tunnels, unexpected discoveries decades later. For more than half a century, numerous bunkers, underground galleries, and buried complexes of the Third Reich remained hidden underground, under sand or dense vegetation. Although thousands were demolished or sealed after 1945, others were forgotten, camouflaged under natural growth, or simply ignored by local authorities. Since the 2000s, revolutionary technological advances have allowed locating these lost sites, revealing secrets that had remained buried for generations. In May 2008, a series of extremely strong winter storms struck the west coast of Jutland, Denmark, in the Huvig area near the North Sea. As a consequence of the massive displacement of dunes and accelerated erosion of the coastline, several Atlantic wall bunkers were exposed, previously covered by up to 3 meters of sand accumulated over decades. These bunkers formed part of a defensive line built by the Wehrmacht between 1942 and 1944. Their original function was to stop a possible Allied landing on the Danish coast, although most never entered real combat. 2 9-year-old children, exploring the dunes after the storm, were the first to notice concrete structures emerging from the eroded sand. Tommy Casso, a local electrician with a passion for military history, was contacted by authorities and became one of the first to descend into these time capsules. He described the experience as entering the heart of a pyramid with mummies around. The bunkers were found in an extraordinary state of conservation, with metal beds, original doors, electrical systems, and personal objects exactly as they were abandoned in 1945. The team of archaeologists from the Ringkøbing Skjern Museum quickly documented the structures using drones for 3-dimensional mapping, combined with stratigraphic studies of the surrounding sand. The first images revealed fully equipped bunkers with hanging uniforms, half-finished schnapps bottles, medications against mustard gas, books, keys, hammers, and even stamps with Hitler's image. In a second phase, LiDAR technology mounted on drones was used to identify other partially covered structures along 5 kilometers of coastline. The analysis revealed at least 50 additional bunkers, of which 22 were completely sealed under layers of compacted sand. Jens Andersen, curator of the Hans Tollem Museum specialized in Nazi fortifications, described the finding as unique in Europe for the level of preservation of everyday objects. The bunkers are located on state property under the protection of the Danish Cultural Heritage Law. However, some are found within zones protected for environmental reasons. Any archaeological intervention requires authorization from the Ministry of Environment. Since 2012, part of the complex has become a guided tourist attraction, but other areas remain closed due to risk of structural collapse. The rediscovery of the Maisy Battery in France followed a completely different pattern. In 2004, British researcher Gary Stern, a military memorabilia collector, acquired an American veteran's uniform at an antiques fair. In one of the pockets, he found a detailed German map that indicated the location of a defensive complex between Grand Camp Maisy and the Norman coast, marked as High Resistance Zone. After crossing the information with 1944 aerial photographs and modern topographic maps, Stern located a private wooded zone where satellite images showed anomalous patterns in the vegetation. The terrain belonged to a local farm, whose owners were completely unaware of the existence of buried tunnels or bunkers. After months of legal negotiations, Stern obtained permits to excavate. The excavation process began in January 2006 and lasted for more than 5 years. The discovered complex turned out to be one of the largest defensive batteries in the Normandy region. The Maisy Battery, which had been deliberately covered with earth after its capture in June 1944. The excavations revealed 3 155mm cannons, ammunition bunkers, dormitories, machine gun nests, a fully equipped underground hospital and a command post, all connected by more than 1.5 kilometers of reinforced trenches. Stern used georadar, terrestrial magnetometry and LiDAR technology to identify structures under the vegetable cover that had grown for 60 years. One of the main tunnels was located 4.5 meters deep, completely intact and still sealed by a steel door with its original lock functioning. The interior contained artillery maps, aiming instruments, unused ammunition and medical equipment in operative conditions. The Maisy Battery was registered as a historic site of national interest after years of controversy with the French Ministry of Defense, which for decades had ignored or minimized the importance of the complex. In 2007, Stern opened the place as an open-air museum, preserving most of the complex in its original archaeological state. In 2015, its inclusion in the French National Archaeological Inventory was formalized. The Wolfschanze in Poland has experienced a new phase of discoveries between 2016 and 2023. Although partially destroyed by the Germans themselves in their retreat, vast sections of Hitler's headquarters remained hidden under layers of collapsed concrete, dense vegetation, and natural accumulations of earth and leaves. Teams of archaeologists from the Museum of Polish History and the University of Warsaw have carried out systematic campaigns to map the undocumented areas of the complex. Aerial LiDAR technology has been employed to penetrate the vegetation of the Masuria forest. The images allowed detecting linear and rectangular anomalies that corresponded with buried walls, hidden foundations, and sealed entrances that did not appear in the German plans recovered after the war. Archaeologists used ground scanners to locate specific structures and selective manual excavation at strategic points. In 2021, one of the discovered entrances led to a descending staircase that was partially cleared, revealing original electrical wiring and a fallen but intact armored door. The tunnels connected SS officer bunkers with undocumented escape routes. In April 2024, during a directed excavation in the eastern sector of the complex, incomplete human remains were found buried under the rubble of a collapsed old medical post. The forensic analysis performed by the Medical Institute of Krakow determined that the remains belonged to a man between 35 and 45 years old, deceased between 1943 and 1944 from cranioencephalic trauma. Along with the remains, SS insignia and a leather briefcase containing partially legible documents were found. Modern discovery methods share advanced archaeological techniques that have revolutionized underground exploration. LiDAR allows detecting reliefs and buried structures under forests or dunes using high-precision laser pulses. Comparative aerial photography analyzes historical images from the RAF or USAAF along with current satellite images to identify relief changes, artificial lines, or anomalous structural shadows. Ground-penetrating radar uses electromagnetic waves to visualize underground structures up to 10 meters deep, depending on terrain composition. Magnetometry detects alterations in the magnetic field caused by metallic structures, reinforced concrete, or large volume buried deposits. Testimonies from local residents have been fundamental. Accounts from civilians, shepherds, farmers, or ex-soldiers who remembered hidden entrances, underground sounds, or terrain anomalies. Legal and political obstacles significantly complicate these discoveries. Much of the terrain where bunkers are found belongs to private individuals or has been urbanized. Excavations require complex legal authorization, and conflicts frequently arise over ownership of found objects. Many sites are in natural areas protected for environmental reasons, limiting archaeological intervention periods. The presence of unexploded ammunition or explosives hinders safe access. It requires intervention by deactivation experts and safety measures that enormously increase excavation costs. Some governments have minimized or ignored the existence of certain sites for political reasons or because they do not appear in official defense catalogues. In those cases, recognition of the site as historical heritage requires years of technical documentation and academic pressure. Public access to these discoveries varies according to local jurisdiction. In Denmark, the Huvig bunkers are partially open to the public with guided tours, but the most fragile areas remain restricted. In France, the Maisy Battery operates as a private museum with regulated access. In Poland, the new sections of the Wolfschanze, discovered between 2019 and 2023, are not open to the public until their structural study and safety reinforcement are completed. The Wolf's Lair, Hitler's final refuge. In the dense forests of Masuria, where centenary pines filter sunlight in changing patterns, one of the most important command centers of the Third Reich is hidden. The Wolfschanze was not simply a war bunker. It was the operational heart from where Hitler directed the Eastern Campaign, the place where he survived the most famous assassination attempt in modern history, and the scenario of some of the most decisive moments of World War II. Built between 1940 and 1941 in the forest of Gierwasch near the city of Kętrzyn, the location was not accidental. German military planners selected this site applying specific strategic criteria: wooded terrain that provided natural concealment against aerial reconnaissance, direct railway access from Berlin without intermediate stops, proximity to the Eastern Front for immediate tactical communications, and sufficient isolation to create an autonomous security perimeter of several kilometers. The complex was organized in 3 concentric security zones called Sperrkreise. Sperrkreis I constituted the central nucleus, exclusive for Hitler and his immediate entourage. It contained the personal Führerbunker, the dependencies of Wilhelm Keitel, Alfred Jodl, Martin Bormann and Heinrich Himmler, in addition to the conference bunker where the general staff met daily to review the front situation. Sperrkreis II encompassed the expanded operational zone. Here were found the OKW officers' barracks, technical quarters, long-range radio stations, general dining room, telephone exchange with encrypted connections, meteorology office for operations planning, and the military hospital equipped for emergency surgeries. This zone also included the main electrical generators and water treatment plants. Sperrkreis III constituted the defensive perimeter zone. It was composed of anti-aircraft defense positions with 88mm cannons, extensive anti-personnel mine barriers, light artillery bunkers for ground defense, guard posts with machine guns, and the camouflaged railway system that connected with the national network without revealing the final destination. The physical infrastructure was imposing, more than 80 fortified buildings, including 50 reinforced concrete bunkers with roofs up to 8 meters thick. The buildings were camouflaged with specialized nets, anti-reflection paint and vegetable roofs that imitated the surrounding forest. The electrical and telecommunications network functioned completely underground, invisible from the air. Ventilation systems included forced filtering and protection against nerve gas for the main bunkers. Anti-seismic reinforcements in the roofs were designed to resist 2-ton penetration bombs. The complex also included 2 secondary airfields in the vicinity and an internal railway station that allowed discrete trips between Berlin and the headquarters. Adolf Hitler arrived at the Wolfschanze for the first time on June 24, 1941, 3 days after the beginning of Operation Barbarossa. During the following 3 years, he spent more than 800 days in the complex, establishing a pattern of prolonged permanence that made it his main operational residence. From this base, he directed the most critical operations of the Eastern Front. The coordination of the German advance on Kiev, Minsk and Leningrad was planned from the map rooms of the Wolfschanze. The planning of the offensive on Stalingrad in 1942 was developed in daily meetings where Hitler received direct reports from the front by the OKW. Strategic orders were transmitted directly to Army Group Center and North through encrypted communication systems. Coordination with the Luftwaffe for the deployment of night fighters and tactical bombings was carried out from the complex's communication center. Meetings with SS chiefs, Himmler and Heydrich, about implementation of the final solution and deportations in the east also took place in these fortified installations. The complex housed more than 2,000 people at its operational peak, including specialized secretaries, radio technicians, cooks, SS guards, maintenance personnel, interpreters, cartographers, and encryption specialists. Daily life followed strict military routines with synchronized schedules for meals, briefings, and communications with other headquarters. On July 20, 1944, the Wolfschanze became the scene of the most famous assassination attempt against Hitler. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, convinced that Hitler had to be eliminated to allow a negotiated surrender of the Reich, entered the conference room with a briefcase bomb. The attempt took place in the Lagerbaracke, the conference room of Sperrkreis Bunthurst, at 12:42 in the afternoon. The conference room was a relatively light structure with open windows, which significantly reduced the effect of the explosion. Stauffenberg had prepared 2 charges of British plastic explosive with timer, but only managed to activate one due to interruptions during preparation. The bomb detonated as planned, but Hitler survived with light burns, injuries to one arm, and a cerebral concussion. 4 officers died in the attempt, including General Gunther Korten and Colonel Heinz Brandt. The repression was immediate and brutal. In the following days, more than 7,000 people were arrested by the Gestapo, 4,980 interrogated under torture, and at least 200 publicly executed. The investigation discovered an extensive network of high-level military, civil and religious resistance that had been planning a coup d'etat. The Wolfschanze security system was drastically reinforced after the attempt. Perimeter walls were expanded, anti-explosive traps were installed in accesses, secondary exits were armored and guard personnel was increased. The original conference bunker was demolished for security and reconstructed in a more armored version in September 1944. Between 2016 and 2022, archaeologists from the Polish History Museum carried out excavation and LiDAR scanning campaigns to map unexplored sections of the complex. The findings included remains of a blocked underground tunnel that connected Himmler's bunker with an escape area 6 meters deep. Fragments of military ceramics, original electrical components, and partially destroyed encryption devices were found. A partially buried room contained documents sealed in metal cylinders that had resisted decades of humidity. In April 2024, during a directed excavation in the eastern sector, incomplete human remains were found buried under the rubble of a collapsed medical post. Forensic analysis determined that they belonged to a man between 35 and 45 years old, deceased between 1943 and 1944 from cranioencephalic trauma. Along with the remains, SS insignia and a leather briefcase containing documents with OKW letterhead were found. The cylinders recovered in 2022 contained deployment orders dated June 1944, lists of officers with internal identification codes, and sketches of reinforcements made after the July 20th attempt. The Rastenburg Führerbunker was located at the end of Sperrkreis the Mar. It had walls 4 meters thick, 3 differentiated levels, command room with maps updated daily, personal bedroom with Spartan furniture, and strategic maps room for long-term planning. The system included air filtering with protection against nerve gas and 2 emergency exits hidden among the forest vegetation. The original plans, recovered from the Reichsbauamt archive, show the internal distribution with precise dimensions, including evacuation stairs, redundant electrical connections, and armored zones for communications. Photographs taken by the Soviet Army in 1945 show the bunker partially destroyed, with collapsed concrete walls and twisted steel, product of the systematic blasting carried out by the SS before the retreat toward Berlin. Despite the rudimentary conditions, the Führer bunker contained updated front maps, direct communication systems with other headquarters, military intelligence archives, and equipment for conferences with the High Command. Living conditions were Spartan. Constant humidity due to leaks, water pumps functioning continuously, and total dependence on diesel generators for electricity. The Wolfschanze constituted a command system of operational scale with complete logistical autonomy, strategic armor, and highly planned internal networks. Its progressive discovery since the 1990s, and especially the findings between 2016 and 2024, have allowed reconstructing not only its architectural design, but also its operational functions, many of which were not completely documented in Allied archives after the war. The Riese Enigma, megaproject in the Owl Mountains. In the mountains of southwestern Poland, where centenary pines intertwine with millenary granite outcrops, lies buried one of the most enigmatic projects of the Third Reich. Project Riese was not a singular structure, but a network of at least 7 underground complexes that extends through the gory Soe, the Owl Mountains, next to the imposing castle of Książ. Its magnitude, its uncertain purpose, and the deliberate destruction of its archives have made it one of the most studied archaeological mysteries of World War II. Between 1943 and 1945, while German factories succumbed under Allied bombings, tens of thousands of forced workers excavated tunnels in the hardest rock of Silesia. What they left behind was a partially finished underground labyrinth, whose real objective was lost with the systematic destruction of documents by the SS during the German retreat. Project Riese encompassed an extensive strip of the central Sudetes in the Lower Silesia region, German territory until 1945. The complexes were strategically dispersed among dense forests, taking advantage of the mountainous topography and gneiss outcrops, an extremely hard metamorphic rock ideal for long-term defensive excavation. The 7 main sites identified to date include Osawka near Guszyce, Włodarz near Walim, Rzeczka, Długowice Górne, Soboń, Sokolec, and the underground extensions of Książ Castle. Each complex presents distinctive characteristics in terms of depth, tunnel distribution, and degree of completion, suggesting specialized functions within a broader master plan. Studies carried out between 1990 and 2023 by the Polish Geological Institute and teams of independent archaeologists have documented more than 9 linear kilometers of tunnels excavated in different phases of advance. The total volume of removed rock exceeds 120,000 cubic meters, of which less than 15% is lined with reinforced concrete, indicating that construction was abruptly interrupted. Most of the passages are between 3 and 5 meters wide, with ceilings that oscillate between 3 and 12 meters high, depending on the specific sector. Some sections present multiple levels, especially in Wodars, where there are vestiges of collapsed or deliberately unconcluded intermediate platforms. Excavation combined manual and explosive techniques, evidenced by drill marks and directed fracture patterns visible on the rock walls. The complexes possess multiple main accesses, typically between 2 and 4 entrances connected to carefully hidden forest roads. In Osawka and Riese, deep ventilation shafts and drainage channels excavated with technical precision have been identified. Reinforced concrete lining appears only in specific sectors, suggesting that construction followed a priority schedule interrupted by external events. The enigmatic character of Project Riese is due largely to the almost total absence of complete official documentation. Unlike other Reich works where detailed technical archives exist, here the records were deliberately destroyed by the SS before the advance of the Red Army in January 1945. This systematic destruction of evidence has fueled decades of speculation about the real purpose of the project. The recovered fragmentary documents include partial technical plans found in the organization Todt Archive, which mention the Riese site under the denomination Geheime Reichssache 91/44. Correspondence between Albert Speer and architect Siegfried Schmelcher has been preserved, where the relocation of strategic installations toward Lower Silesia for operational security reasons is discussed. Internal reports from the Hauptamt SS Wirtschaftsverwaltung enumerate human and material resources assigned to builders in the Waldenberg region, but without specifying the final purpose of the works. Testimonies from SS personnel captured in 1945 indicate that much of the documentation was burned in April of that year or transported toward Bavaria in metal boxes that were never recovered. The absence of complete documentation has generated 3 main hypotheses about Riese's function, all supported by partial evidence or structural analysis. The underground headquarters theory for Hitler maintains that Riese was conceived as a new headquarters to be used if Berlin was threatened. The mention of the complex in Speer's reports and the planned underground connection with Change Castle, which was being remodeled simultaneously, reinforce this interpretation. Blocked elevators were found in Change that connected with lower tunnels, suggesting that the works were designed to house high Reich commands. The broader rooms of Osawka and Wodars show structural reinforcements similar to those used in OKW command bunkers, including redundant ventilation systems and spaces for advanced communication installations. The industrial hypothesis poses that Riese would be an underground weapons production plant, probably for high-priority weapons like V-1 and V-2 missiles or engines for jet fighters. In 2010, archaeologists found heavy machinery bases and metal anchors embedded in the floor of Osawka, consistent with assembly line industrial installations. The dimensions of some galleries allow the installation of chain production equipment. Speer's documents explicitly mention the intention to transfer part of armament production to installations absolutely secure against air attacks, with specific cross-reference to installations in the Waldenberg sector, military denomination of the region where Riese is located. A less documented but technically plausible hypothesis is that parts of the complex were destined for experimental development, advanced materials laboratories, ballistic tests, or propulsion system trials. In Wodars, one of the tunnels ends in a circular room with reinforced ventilation system, without visible connection to the rest of the network, which has led to interpreting it as a possible technical test chamber. Some incomplete plans show sections labeled as Energiegruppe AB, which could correspond to specialized or experimental electrical installations. The absence of direct railway connections in some sectors suggests that certain areas could have had functions distinct from massive industrial production. Since 1995, the Polish government has financed systematic archaeological excavations in cooperation with European universities and specialized technical teams. The campaigns between 2016 and 2022 used LiDAR mounted on drones to map hidden entrances and collapsed galleries not registered in partial German plans. The scanning allowed identifying at least 17 previously undocumented entrances and 4 tunnel segments not connected to any known external structure. Measurements of humidity, gneiss stability, and water infiltration tests were performed. The data indicate that most tunnels could support large structural weights if the works had been completed according to the original design. Some sections present underground drainage systems of complex design, with bifurcations at different depth levels, suggesting advanced hydraulic engineering planned for long-term operations. The technical quality of excavation in hard rock demonstrates the use of specialized equipment and personnel experienced in tunnel engineering. In 2014, specific excavations were restarted in the subsoil of Change Castle, where 2 hidden elevators, a circular chamber lined with refractory brick, and an escape staircase not registered in the castle's original plans were located. In 2021, a 60-meter tunnel was found that connects the basement of the west wing with an unfinished gallery 18 meters below the castle's ground level. The excavations have revealed that Change Castle was being modified simultaneously with Riese's construction, suggesting operational coordination between both projects. The connection tunnels were designed to allow discrete movement between the castle's installations and the underground complexes, supporting the theory of use as an alternative headquarters. Project Riese represents the largest set of unfinished underground military installations of the Third Reich. Despite its incomplete state, its architectural characteristics and the scale of the works reveal planning that far exceeded conventional defensive needs. The theories about its function are not mutually exclusive. It is possible that Riese was conceived as a multifunctional logistical center, destined to simultaneously house industrial production, military command, and high-ranking personnel. Currently, 3 of the complexes are open to the public as underground museums. Osauka, Wodash, and Rechka offer safe routes enabled with modern lighting and safety measures. The other installations remain sealed or partially collapsed, awaiting future investigations that may definitively resolve the enigma of their original purpose.